promoting dialogue.
Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Niger's junta leader Chani promises to realize the hope of a 5-year transition.
Parmi les objectifs fixés à nos travaux figure.
Among the objectives set for our work, the determination of the duration of the transition is prominent. Regarding the first point relating to the duration of the transition, all the subcommittees examined the issue and the participants overwhelmingly recommended a minimum duration of 5 years.
Ongoing strike by Autonomous Union of Physicians disrupt medical operations at public hospitals in Senegal.
It is a directive that has been followed by all comrades across the national territory. The directive has been followed 100%.
Local farmers discover Guinea activist Sako after being kidnapped by special forces. And 4th International Blue Economy Conference enters day 2 in the Gambian capital, Banjul. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. We'll begin in the Sahel region, particularly Niger, where participants at the recently concluded national conference have proposed a 5-year transitional period. The consultations gathered over 700 participants from diverse socio-professional backgrounds across the country. During the 5 days of intense work, the participants made several decisions, including the duration of the political transition and the dissolution of certain political parties. Christopher Ticho reports.
In addition to the 5-year transitional period, participants at the national conference proposed the dissolution of all political parties and the creation of a new charter that would limit the number of political parties to a maximum of 5. This was announced on Thursday by Dr. Mamudu Haruna Jingare, the chairman of the committee responsible for conducting the national conference.
Parmi les objectifs fixés à nos travaux figure.
Among the objectives set for our work, the determination of the duration of the transition is prominent. Regarding the first point relating to the duration of the transition, all the subcommittees examined the issue and the participants overwhelmingly recommended a minimum duration of 5 years, renewable, which could change depending on the political and security situation in our country. Concerning the issue of political and institutional re-establishment, the conference proposes the dissolution of political parties during the re-establishment process and the adoption of a new charter of political parties with a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5 political parties.
Des partis politiques avec un minimum de 2 et un maximum de 5 partis politiques.
Meanwhile, in his closing speech, Niger's transitional president General Abdurrahman Chiani pledged to implement the conclusions of the national conference without any weakness. These conclusions notably recommended a renewable 5-year foundation period and the dissolution of political parties. In an exclusive approach, General Chiani called on all Nigerians who, for whatever reason, have not been able to contribute to this great national work to engage in the coming weeks. For 5 days, more than 700 delegates from various regions of Niger and the diaspora discussed several challenges facing the nation, including issues related to the economy, security, resource exploitation, and diplomacy. Since the takeover on July 26, 2023, Niger has been led by the CNSP, which advocates for the country's sovereignty, particularly in relation to the former colonial power, France.
Christopher Ticho filed that report. In Burkina Faso, a CSO known as the Citizens' Broom is calling for the immediate release of 2 activists a year after their disappearance. Rasman Zinaba and Bashir Bajo were forcefully drafted to battlefield by the government on February 20, 2024. 12 months later, the families of Zinaba and Bajo still have no news regarding their whereabouts, according to a statement from the organization. The Citizens' Broom denounces this situation and demands their release. Echatiso has the rest of the details in this report filed in by WDL's Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou.
Abudu Rasman Zinaba, in charge of organization of the Citizens Broom, and activist Bashiru Bajo, administrator of social affairs, were respectively kidnapped on February 20 and 21, 2024 in Ouagadougou. Thus, it has been exactly 1 year since these two civil society leaders were forcibly conscripted for operational theaters. In its statement, the civil society organization recalls that a court decision had nevertheless ordered the suspension of requisitions. The statement stated, and I quote, "Despite this court decision, which leaves no ambiguity about the illegal nature of the punitive requisitions, comrades Bashiru Bajo and Abudu Rasman Zinaba were kidnapped and forcibly conscripted, as were several other citizens. These include leaders of civil society organizations, politicians, journalists, media hosts, media columnists, social media activists, magistrates, etc., all arbitrarily deprived of their rights and freedom." End of quote. The Citizens Broom indicates that since the execution of these requisitions, the conscripted individuals have not been allowed to contact their relatives. It added, and I quote, "This prolonged arbitrary and illegal sequestration of citizens undoubtedly constitutes a serious violation of human dignity." End of quote. The group also calls for the immediate release of the two militants and all individuals conscripted for operational theaters to date.
Our correspondent in Ouagadougou, Martin Kaba, filed a report, and it was voiced by Eche Atiso. Meanwhile, in Guinea, the activist and president of the Guinean Social Forces Forum, Abdul Sako, who was abducted by members of the Special Forces Group, has been found. Sako was kidnapped on the night of Tuesday to Wednesday at his home. However, this Thursday, the collective of lawyers of Abdul Sako announced that its client was found on Wednesday evening by farmers. The council alleged that Sako was found in critical condition, tortured and abandoned by his captors in the bush near Camp 66 in the Forêt-Caria prefecture. Said to be in critical state of health, and arrangements were made for him to receive primary care in a clinic in Conakry. Meanwhile, the collective of lawyers called on the public prosecutor at the Court of First Instance of Dixon to take the appropriate steps by informing national and international opinion on the perpetrators of this kidnapping and bring them to justice. The collective recalls that this kidnapping follows threats that its client and some of his colleagues had received, and in prevention of which a regular complaint against X had been filed with the Dixon Public Prosecutor's Office.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, here in Senegal, the ongoing strike by the Autonomous Union of Physicians of Senegal, SAMES, is disrupting the operations of several public hospitals across the country. Striking physicians have cancelled consultations, leaving patients in a state of uncertainty. As a result of this, tensions are rising in health facilities. On Wednesday, WDLs visited the Fan Hospital in Abassandao and continued to the Principal Hospital, where the striking doctors chose to remain silent. Meanwhile, patients are suffering the consequences of the situation. Rosen Kohli completes the story.
The SAMES strike is felt at the Fan Hospital in Dakar, where corridors are crowded with waiting patients. But here, there is radio silence from the staff phone on the scene. No one has agreed to comment on respecting the slogan. After Fan, we head to Abassandao, one of the largest hospitals in the Senegalese capital. The same observation in this hospital center. It is difficult to get a reaction from the striking doctors. Our various attempts were met with refusal from those in white medical coats. We again direct our attention to the main hospital, and here, only the head of doctor agrees to speak to us.
I am the administrative mandate of the emergency reception service of the main hospital. It is a military training hospital, so I can say that the mandate has not been respected in our service. In Normandy, we don't even feel that there is a strike here.
When contacted by telephone, Jamel Dramé, Deputy Secretary General of SAMES, underlines that the strike has been respected throughout the Senegalese territory.
It is a directive that has been followed by all comrades across the national territory. Aside what has been mentioned regarding the handling of emergency cases, the directive has been followed 100%.
In the waiting room, faces are closed. Some have had their appointments cancelled. The standoff continues. SAMES is sticking to its positions. In the meantime, it is the patients who are being affected.
Augustin Kuli voiced that report as prepared by Mamadou Ramatan Jallo. Now, the 4th International Blue Economic Conference is underway in the Gambian capital, Banjul. The event, which began on Wednesday, is set to run for 3 days, bringing together world leaders, industry experts, and stakeholders from around the globe. Sankli Janko reports.
The conference aims to foster collaboration, share knowledge, and explore solutions for sustainable ocean and maritime resource management. As the world continues to face challenges like climate change, marine pollution, and overfishing, experts have been highlighting the significance of the discussions here in Banjul. Mohamed B.S. Jallo is the Vice President of the Gambia and he served as the keynote speaker.
The New World Order and the lifestyles that accompany it are exerting unbearable pressure on our water bodies and destroying them gradually. This has brought about a new era of unprecedented challenges and opportunities, which make it inevitable in the interest of all generations to chart a course towards a sustainable and prosperous future for our oceans and waterways.
The Vice Chancellor of the Regional Maritime University in Accra, Ghana, Jethro W. Brooks, highlighted the potentials in this sector.
The blue economy represents more than just economic growth. It serves as an interconnected system where the environment, social equity, and economic prosperity can work hand in hand. It is all about ensuring that our development does not come at the expense of the very resources we depend on.
Key discussions will focus on the future of the blue economy, with a strong focus on Africa's role in harnessing its vast marine resources responsibly. At the conclusion of the conference, a comprehensive resolution will be presented to the African Union, ECOWAS, and the International Maritime Organization, aimed at strengthening international cooperation and setting actionable targets for the sector. For Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
Let's now turn our attention to Liberia, where the House of Representatives summoned officials from the Ministry of Justice, including the police force and the Immigration Service, to discuss the circumstances surrounding acts of torture committed by a Chinese national against a Liberian citizen. This case has raised significant concerns about the treatment of citizens by foreign nationals and the level of protection provided by local authorities. In a heartfelt appeal for justice, the victim, Momo David, is urgently requesting medical attention. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker report.
The traumatic details of his experience were shared on Thursday, where he recounted the violence inflicted upon him and the urgent need for medical care. Davis Odile began over an accusation of theft, leading to what he describes as a brutal attack by Shio and several associates.
The only man I can remember telling me calling is Yellow Machine, and the man I was telling me pepper spray. I asked me if I get somebody that we went there and took the lead and sold up plate, said I'll go for it, sell it, I'll win it.
Representative Jones of Magigi County spearheaded the legislative response, referring to Article 21D of Liberia's 1986 Constitution, which prohibits torture and inhumane treatment. He asserted that the law entitles victims of such abuses to justice and that the legislature must ensure the rights of all citizens are upheld.
What baffles me in the torture is the Chinese national made the all had and wasted it on Momo David. He lighted plastic and allowed the burning plastic to on Momo David.
In light of these serious allegations, the House of Representatives voted to summon key officials, including the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Inspector General of the Liberia National Police, and the Commissioner of Immigration Services to provide updates about the investigation into Davis' case. Onika Flomo, the chair lady of the Wet Flower community where the incident occurred condemns the actions of Chio as barbaric, highlighting the urgent need for accountability and better protections for citizens.
When I heard the person crying, I would die, my boy, come for me, my God, cause problem for our community.
Despite the ongoing investigation on the charges filed against Chio by the Liberia National Police, Debe remains concerned for his safety and health. For Newslink on the West Africa Democracy Radio, this is Abraham Parker reporting from Monrovia.
In Guinea-Bissau, the higher military court in the capital Wednesday handed down sentences of soldiers involved in a failed coup plot on February 1, 2022. Out of the 24 indicted soldiers, 14 will serve prison terms ranging from 12 to 29 years. According to the ruling, 3 of the accused received a 29-year prison sentence each, 8 others to 24 years, and 3 to 12 years in prison. The convicted military personnel were also dismissed from the Bissau-Guinean Armed Forces. This judgment comes 3 years after the events and only concerns 24 of the 50 people initially implicated in this attempted coup. Recall on February 1, 2022, a group of soldiers attempted to overthrow the government of President Umaru Sissoco Embalo, elected in 2019. The attack failed thanks to the rapid intervention of forces loyal to the president and the international community. Well, looking inward, exploring local resource mobilization and alternative funding mechanisms like social enterprise models are some of the recommendations posed to the regional government by civil society actors. At a webinar organized by the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, on Thursday, various speakers emphasized the need for African civil society to innovate, adapt quickly, and work towards greater self-reliance in response to the funding cuts. These recommendations are coming on the heels of the recent suspension of development aid by the United States, which has had profound implications for civil society across the region, affecting critical sectors such as health, education, governance, and peace and security. Mari Jabate, the Executive Director, Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice, urged West African nations in particular to prioritize efficiency, reduce wasteful spending, and redirect resources toward critical sectors such as health, agriculture, and education.
I think it is high time African activists like us, African intellectuals, our politicians, our technocrats, our businesses, and Africans in general to cut the crap and we confront this issue, all right? Because aid is political. Look at right now what U.S. is doing. They said they are going to cut aid to South Africa because of the South African policy on land. You have a military coup, they cut off aid. You are a government that wants to challenge something, they cut off aid. So aid has been a political tool to control and dominate Africa. And interestingly, we as civil society, most of us are funded by the West. And this is the paradox. Because when we had dictatorship in the Gambia, and until now, I have confronted EU officials, US embassy officials in the Gambia. I said, you people are maintaining dictatorship in Africa. And by so doing, you are encouraging corruption and the underdevelopment and the weakness of Africa. Because you give aid to this government, budget support. And because our government knows I'm going to get budget support from the EU, from the US, the tax money they collect, they plunder it. The aid and grants they receive, they plunder it. So that at the end of the day, we are highly indebted, but at the same time, highly poor. I said, that's a contradiction in terms.
Mari Jabate is Executive Director, Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar and live on wadr.org. Here is a reminder of the top stories. The Just Junta leader China promises to realize the hope of a 5-year transition. Ongoing strike by autonomous union of physicians disrupts medical operations at public hospitals in Senegal. Local farmers discover Guinea activist Sako after being kidnapped by a special forces group. And 4th International Blue Economic Conference enters day 2 in the Gambian capital, Banjul. Still ahead, we do have a guest interview and sport news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on wadr.org, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, the government of Ghana has approved a 10% wage hike for public sector workers following successful negotiations between the labor union and President John Dramani Mahama. The Finance Minister, Dr. Kasiel Atufarsan, and Minister for Labour, Jobs and Employment, Dr. Abdurrashid Pelpour, were also present at the meeting. Dr. Pelpour announced that the daily minimum wage has now risen to 19 Ghana cedi. This marks the second wage adjustment in less than a year. The latest pay rise follows a significant 23% salary adjustment in 2024, which was aimed at cushioning workers against rising living costs. President Mahama personally engaged with union representatives to secure their support for the increase, underscoring the government's commitment to easing the financial burdens amid economic challenges. Minister of Labour, Jobs and Employment, Rashid Pelpour, in his announcement said the increment takes effect on March 1, 2025. The wage hike is expected to bring relief to thousands of public sector workers in Ghana. Now, the Nigerian Senate has summoned security intelligence chiefs to investigate claims that the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, is financing terrorism in the country. The resolution followed a motion of urgent national security raised by Senator Aline Dume, APC Borno South, during plenary in Abuja. As Usman Omar reports, since an American Congressman, Scott Perry, made a presentation.
Senator Ndume stressed the need for a thorough probe, citing the prolonged devastation caused by Boko Haram. His concerns align with recent remarks by Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, who suggested in an interview with Al Jazeera that armed groups in Nigeria receive international financial backing. Senate President Godswill Akpabio upheld the resolution but cautioned against public discussions on sensitive security matters. He therefore directed that intelligence chiefs first brief senators in a closed-door session for clarity.
We must hear from our own security agencies. We must hear from our intelligence agencies and questionings and all that to brief us. And security is not something we discuss in the market. It's something that should be done in closed session.
Senator Abdul Ningi from Bauchi Central backed this approach, arguing that an open debate will not do justice to the gravity of the allegations.
The pointer by the representative by Mr. Perry Scott, I think there will be light at the end of the tunnel. Let us support this motion wholeheartedly so that we can unravel the veracity or otherwise of the allegation.
These concerns gained international traction after U.S. Congressman Scott Perry accused USAID of indirectly funding terrorist groups, including Boko Haram, during a congressional hearing on government inefficiency. The allegations have fueled global scrutiny, especially in Africa, where USAID provides significant aid. Nigeria has battled Boko Haram since 2009, with over 2.5 million people displaced and thousands killed, particularly in Borno and Yobe State, northeastern Nigeria. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Omar reporting from Abuja.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, let's take you back to Nigeria, where the Senate has summoned security intelligence chiefs to investigate claims that the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, is financing terrorism in the country. Well, this has sparked wide reactions, and our guest this evening is public policy analyst and country director, Equal Access International, Dr. Maja Peters, who speaks about the issues, calling for an intense probe.
It's expected they don't say things like this that compromise the sovereignty of a nation, and the executive or the legislature will be quiet. So it is expected, the summon is expected, and for them to hear clarification. But since Scott Perry made that assertion, there have been a lot of issues that has come up. The U.S. Embassy yesterday debunked it and said they were not financing terrorism in Nigeria, and they are very committed to Nigeria's fight and supporting Nigeria's issue around counter-terrorism. But the truth is that when that came up, it raises a lot of concern. I'm not saying AID, United States Agency for International Development, is complicit, but we won't run away from the fact that there are always interferences in domestic affairs of other nations, especially when they are benefit for the third-party interest. That happens globally. It happens everywhere. We're still seeing it happen in the Sahel. We're seeing that happen in CAR. We're seeing it happen in DRC. So it does happen. So when people raise those kind of assertions, it might have been a slip. It might have been something that is true, But if I'm in the Senate, I will ask for verifiable evidence, because we'll push further to meet with the lawmaker in the U.S. to give us evidence of what he sees, and we will ask on
the Information Bill of the U.S. to ask if we could get details of what Elon Musk and his group has found out that has led to that assertion. I won't sweep it under the carpet.
In other parts of the Sahel, they are exiting some NGOs because they believe that these NGOs are those financing terrorism activities in their country. What do you think the Nigerian federal government should do regarding some other NGOs that are suspects of terrorism financing?
The government should not take it lightly when you suspect any organization, and that has happened, because one, the most important thing that the country should take very seriously is the issue of its sovereignty. So when other people come with their principles of working for humanity or humanitarian protection, and it goes contrary to the issue of your national security, you should take it very seriously. At times when they have gotten organizations on camera that were complicit of distributing foods and other humanitarian aids to organized armed groups, and they will say it's part of their work of independence and being able to work for everybody and being universal and all of that. But you see, sometimes you block aid that goes to people because you want to stop something. I have had series of experiences in humanitarian intervention, but when it compromises the internal security, sovereignty of the nation, and especially when a lot of people are being impacted by it, especially when it promotes banditry and criminality and all of that, I think there are times you allow the law to take its course. So there is nothing wrong now in federal government trying to do a mapping and a viva and a vetting of all organizations that are operating in this country, trying to track the sources of their funding and what those monies are being used for. For the national peace, it's very important for that to happen. And I will actually support that to happen to all civil society organizations, especially in INGOs operating within the framework of it.
That was Margie Peter, guest this evening, and he is the Country Director, Equal Access International. Well, here is Sport News with Sankule Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. France international Kylian Mbappe was the hero as he helped his Real Madrid side to the round of 16 in the UEFA Champions League on Wednesday night. The Real Madrid forward tore Manchester City apart after netting a hat-trick against the English champions. Mbappe netted a hat-trick to send the citizens sparking from the competition before they could even reach the last 16 proper in a 3-1 and 6-3 on aggregate. Elsewhere in the UEFA Champions League, PSV Eindhoven beat Juventus 3-1 on the night and 4-3 on aggregate to progress to the next phase of the competition. French champions Paris Saint-Germain ran riots after thrashing Brest 7-0 and 10-0 on aggregate. German side Borussia Dortmund were held to a goalless draw by Portuguese side Sporting CP, but the German side won 3-0 on aggregate and booked qualification to the round of 16. Meanwhile, Egypt international Mohamed Salah scored for Liverpool in their 2-2 draw against Aston Villa in the English Premier League on Wednesday night. Salah pounced on a defensive error to put Liverpool ahead before Yuri Tillemans equalized for the Villains. The Birmingham-based Villa extended their lead before the break, but Trent Alexander-Arnold found the leveler for Liverpool in the second half. Salah's goal was not enough to earn his Liverpool side a victory, as they lead the table 8 points ahead of Arsenal with a game more. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And that's it on this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mauro Juf and Umu Danogo for the technical support. To connect with us on all of our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, RWDR News, and Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a flagship environment program, Embaroscope. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New EMEA.